I'm just appreciating that Nick told Erica to buckle up. It's going to be a roller coaster ride of a demo. Okay, I don't know if DemoCon is quite that exciting, but we're gonna make it. We're gonna manifest it. So all right, Kayla, how you want to get this thing started?
Well, the first thing is I just want to welcome anyone who's here who's not a current student. I know that sometimes we have prospective students and Mod Zero students show up just to kind of get a sense of what types of things you can build here. And so welcome. You've already seen the chat go wild. Just prepare, it will continue to get more wild. But yeah, I just want to say welcome. And if you have questions, you can follow up with me afterwards. But then I'm gonna pass it off to you, Jeff. The first thing we'll do is introduce our judges.
Yeah, thanks. It's nice to see over 100 folks here at DemoCon today. So we have three returning judges. First up, Mr. Justin Dominguez. Second, Alana. And third, Hugh. I'm going to ask them to say a quick hello if that works for y'all. Can we start with Justin? You ready?
Sure. Hi, I'm Justin Dominguez. I work on Turing staff. Technically, I'm the technical systems administrator, which is just a bunch of jargon that means I do basically anything involving computers or systems or anything technical. And if it needs administering, that's kind of what I do. So engineering, IT, operations, whatever you want to call it. Before Turing, my career was mostly like as a DevOps engineer, so kind of in that space. And yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited to see the projects.
I think it's very fancy that you're a published technical author, Justin. What's the title, the correct title of your book?
It's even worse than my current title. It's Cloud Native DevOps with Kubernetes, a book about the cloud.
I don't accept this negative self-talk, and I think that is much more badass than any book I've ever published, which doesn't exist. So thanks, Justin. And Alana?
Hello. Yes, Alana here. I am a software engineer at Peloton. Fun fact, I graduated almost, I guess it was 7 years ago. And Jeff had hired me. So I came on staff and I worked for Jeff for about a year and a half, to which actually more fun fact was he originally, when I asked him about it, he's like, yeah, no. But then, yeah, I ended up working for Jeff for about a year and a half. So Turing has a big place in my heart, and excited to see what y'all got today.
Yeah. And, there are a lot of great things about being remote since COVID started. But one of the losses is that Alana will forever be the only staff member or student to accept the challenge of fitting into small things. Was there a suitcase once? I remember we put you in 2 boxes. You fit into 2 boxes. I shouldn't say we put you in. You came up with this plan and fit into 2 very small boxes. But I want to say, was there a suitcase, or am I making that up?
I fit into small places, but I would just like to preface it with saying it's all for a scare or a prank, right? Like I'm going to scare somebody. And so there was a couple boxes in different Turing classrooms that were perfect for that situation.
Yeah, taking advantage, scare advantage. I appreciate it. And Hugh, Mr. Hugh, what's your Hugh intro?
Yeah, I don't know what it should be. So yeah, I went to Turing about 5 years ago, was in the front end program. I was a classically trained artist. I did painting and drawing for a long time, graphic design. I owned a small business. And then I've been doing software for about 5 years. I'm currently a staff engineer and technically a front end architect. And I work at a company called Twilio.
Why you gotta say technically a front-end architect?
It's not in the title, but I work on internal frameworks to make building front-end applications at scale easier, which I guess is architect.
Do you think, at least of the people on this demo comp, I'm gonna say you've probably interviewed more students than any person, including me, in Turing history. Do you fear any bias of people you interviewed popping up in demo comp? Do we need to do a cross-reference bias check in here?
I don't think there's a huge bias. I think if I interviewed you and you actually even decide to reveal yourself that I was your interviewer, that's a win in and of itself. I've had a few people reach out and tell me that, and I think it's super cool. So if you're here and I interviewed you, good job, you did it.
You did it. Well, you're doing okay. Maybe if they're in mod 4 now, they still got a little bit of doing it left before you get to be done with us. But thanks y'all for coming and judging today. The way judging works is we have some demos prepared by the team. So we have 5 teams today. Kayla is going to MC the demo videos. And then after each video, judges will have an opportunity to ask a couple questions. Teams will respond, and then we'll move on to the next. As we get through all 5 teams, then the judges and I will step out to a breakout room for some very intense deliberations, notes, arguments, etc. We will pick a top 2, so a runner-up and a grand prize winner, and then come back, announce the winners, be done here. It'll probably take us like an hour and 20 minutes, hour and 15 minutes. It's kind of my guess with 5 projects. Anything else I missed in there, Kayla?
Nope, that's right.
I would say, audience folks, if you have questions, especially like during the demo video or anything like that, you can feel free to put them in the chat, and you'll often get some responses from the project folks, either in the moment or follow up once they get done with judge questions and their nerves go down a little bit. All right, let's do it.
Awesome. All right, our first project is Speckle. So we'll get it going. I'm gonna, for whatever reason, my computer is sounding really quiet to me, which is why I keep turning the volume all the way up. So if I like blast your ears right now, I apologize, but sound is about to happen somewhere.
See if there's like a
Hold on.
simultaneous freak out across the whole
Yeah,
body.
exactly. Here, I'll start lower. Okay.
Okay.
Here we go.
Can I please Speckle?
Of course.
Hello.
H-E-L-L-O. Hello.
Meet Speckle, a very hungry seal looking to fill his belly with fish, all through the help of children practicing their spelling. Our international team consisted of Logan Matheny, Jen Zeal, Nicole Rue, and Jen Wing. Together we had a vision to help teachers and children in their spelling practices. Speckle brings fun to the application by collecting
Would you see on, it's on QuickTime?
We kept up with
Oh yeah, you got it up 100%. Yeah, I was just seeing if that volume slider on QuickTime was up, which it is. So yeah, I think it's not too loud. So I'll go ahead and system volume max. Let's give it a shot.
Dynamics throughout the project with regular stand-ups and check-ins to keep up to date on the progress of our app as well as everybody's personal mental health. Our planning process started out with just the main idea where we planned to get the data from, and then it grew into something spectacular. We started with the name, and soon enough Speckle showed himself to be a cute and hungry seal on the hunt for fish. We messed around with child-friendly color schemes and fonts to really make it interesting for kids to play, while still keeping the main theme of education. Throughout development, we frequently relied on our Figma board for design and on our Miro board for a detailed breakdown of the architecture of our application.
For our component architecture, we developed a model for our different routes and our varying React components for how our application would function. We also looked at what our general application's data structure would look like within our Redux global state management system. And finally found an API that would give us words as well as their audio files for how to pronounce them. Once we completed our initial wireframes, it was time to start building. For our initial steps, we went ahead and created our basic layout with an audio player and some basic letter inputs. For this step, we utilized mock data and spent the majority of our time learning how Redux worked, as well as how to implement it since none of us had worked with it before. After we successfully completed our MVP, we were able to go ahead and start developing the layout to be a little bit more cohesive in line with our vision. It was at this time we connected the API as well as implemented a cleaner function to make sure we were only working with the data that was necessary for our application to increase performance and make it just generally easier to manage. We also implemented Redux Toolkit to allow us to simplify our Redux implementation by creating slices that would act as single stores for our state behavior, as well as automatically create things like action types, creators, and reducers.
We decided to take a stab at performance metrics in order to see how long it was taking for our app to process the data. We implemented performance.now to check the timing. In further researching how to up the metrics, we added an API catch set to a new map, which stashes away the result of the API call. Then our function is a gatekeeper, checking to see if the data is already in the catch, and it will save an API call by getting the already retrieved data. This is a way to reuse the information we have already received rather than having to retrieve it over and over again. This led us down the path of other ways we could optimize and enhance our application.
To further enhance our app, we took steps to make it feel more like a game. We added animation to our game page so that Speckle appears to move across the page. In addition, we added bubbles to both our start page and our results page. Once we had a working prototype, we did user testing to learn what could be improved for a user's gameplay experience. User feedback became invaluable to us when we added keyboard shortcuts. It helped to make note of what keyboard shortcuts a user expected would allow them to navigate throughout our app. We added autofocus so a user could immediately type without having to select the first box, as well as adding the ability to submit a response using the Enter key. Our app is responsive across screen sizes, so learners can practice spelling on the go. Finally, our site is fully tested using Cypress testing.
We then built our own backend to scale our app that will allow for user creation, class creation, and customization of data. We determined new user stories and asked ourselves questions like, which database structure would best suit our needs, SQL or NoSQL? How should we structure our data, the object that we would send? What endpoints will we need? What response should each endpoint give us back? How will we name our endpoints so they are RESTful? And what database should we use? As 4 front-end students forever curious about all things code, Speckle's MERN stack allowed our dev team to build a full-stack app in JavaScript as we made requests and received data from both the dictionary API and our own API, with next steps including a deployed backend to a cloud platform like Vercel or Heroku to get the server-side off localhost and the front-end off localhost so that actual teachers can start using them, and students, and everybody who wants to use Speckle.
As a team of 4 people passionate about how education and technology integrate, we're excited to explore 2-factor authentication, adding different levels of reading comprehension, optimizing the backend, larger database of words, and multiple languages going forward. Thank you for the opportunity to present our project.
Thanks, team. Judges, when you get a question, would you throw the Zoom raise hand in there? I'm going to ask a first question because I appreciate that y'all listen to me. So tell me more about this performance situation. What did you learn from the performance analysis and implementing the caching? Like, what was good, interesting about it? What was frustrating, annoying, bug-inducing about it?
It was very frustrating in the beginning just to see how slow it was. And I was like, wow, okay, that's a great start. Here we go. And then in implementing the API catch and being able to store that data, it helped me kind of break down how the timing was working and then be able to see, how long it was taking for those API calls to hit. And with the performance.now, together with the API catch, I was able to time it and test it out with the API call and then after we did the API call. And it was a little tedious to try to implement and figure out on my own, but a little bit of research and some time didn't stop me from implementing it and trying it out. And it's something that I'm very interested in, and just seeing how the performance of some of these apps actually affect the app in the long run.
Yeah, and having done it now on this app, like if you were going to do the same thing again, would it be as difficult, or would it be like half as difficult or a tenth as difficult?
I'm going to say maybe about half, maybe a little less than half. It's just going to depend on the type of app I'm working with. But I think for the most part, it shouldn't be too bad after, dabbling in it a little bit already.
Cool. Thanks, Jen. Justin, question?
Yeah, nice job, team. Love the UI, the visuals. I think everything's really, really nice. Looks very polished. My question is around, I looked through your repo and you had a note that you had some like future plans on adding teacher logins or just user logins in general. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that, like how you might go about implementing it. And then if any of those decisions would change your thinking about your current database model, what you might change about your database, if anything.
Yeah, I can start with that, and if anyone from my team wants to jump in. Yeah, so having user authentication was something we wanted to do, especially with wanting to create new users and being able to post data to our database. So currently right now we are doing like authentication just on the front end in terms of just checking to see if that user already exists in our database. And if so, let them into the homepage. If not, don't. But some of our next steps that we wanted to explore that Jen spoke about briefly at the end was like using things like Google authorization or other things that we have to research on real like authentication instead of just because right now how it is we're making a request that's sending back all the data, like the email, the password, it's all like sensitive information. And I know that like in a real scale app, we know that we wouldn't want to actually do that. And we want to use other technologies to help us further secure that authentication. So I think we got like the gist of the logic of how we could check. And then now it's like, how can we actually use like real world tools to authorize users? I hope that answers your question.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks. And Hugh?
Okay. Yeah, I love seeing Redux as like a stretch tech. I think that is something that'll set you up really well for going into like a production level code base. What were some of like, because there it can be a big learning curve trying to set that type of infrastructure up. What were some of like the pitfalls you saw during setup, and like what were some of like the net win benefits that you saw once it was set up?
Yeah, I can start this one out and feel free to chime in, group. I think the learning curve, I won't say that any of us are experts in Redux, and I'm sure once you have an application that's incredibly like large scale, it could probably be hard to work with. But when we were learning, I think we had a handful of tutorials or like videos that were maybe an hour long, and everyone kind of like picked a different one, which I think that actually really helped us hone in on the differences with maybe implementing Redux just like straight up versus using Redux Toolkit, and like how they were different and why one might be a little bit like easier than the other to implement starting out using things like slices. So I think A, it wasn't necessarily as bad as we thought it would be, and B, kind of dividing that learning process and then talking about it was really helpful. And then once we had it actually in the application, I think all of us agreed global state management is just really great from a front end perspective, like being able to reach up and get whatever data you want using uselector and use dispatch to manipulate it and call on your reducers is just infinitely useful. So I think all of us really enjoyed working with it and have continued using it in some of our future projects as we continue to move through to the next mod. Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just I just to hop onto Logan's point of we all did a different approach to learning it, which again was great. And I think when we started Toolkit, I think Logan was the first one who like started Toolkit. One of the challenges was just seeing how much was abstracted. Like I started with like global context API where I was like writing payload and all these things, and then in Toolkit it gets abstracted. So it was like really interesting to kind of see what gets abstracted when we use Toolkit, and then also the value in going back and learning it without the things being abstracted so that we know what's happening behind the scenes. That would help us like better debug, because I think some of the problems we had later was like debugging and then trying to figure out what was happening behind the scenes when so much did feel like it was abstracted. So yeah, that was a really good learning opportunity and seeing like what we wanted to learn more about so we could better debug.
Yeah, one last thing I'll add to that is like really the thing that sticks out to me as the thing that we tracked with Global State was our increment. So keeping track of the count. And once you get to the 10th question, you're directed to the results page. Just overall, looking at like our app.jsx, the routes where we're rendering all of the different components, it's just like really clean and easy to follow. I think looking at an import that's coming in from the top of the page as opposed to like tracing back, like, okay, where did this originate? Just made it easier to work on, in my opinion, than like prop drilling in general.
I was going to just do one plug. If you guys do want to do a full stack auth, I've done this tutorial for auth 0. it's full stack, like JavaScript, TypeScript. It's a good one if you want to take a look at that.
Thanks, you. And Alana?
Yeah, you all talked about being front-end engineers, having to kind of approach the back-end database and structure there. Would love to hear like a little bit more about how you all approach that, and like any tools you might have used that were helpful in that approach as well.
Yeah, I think I can start it. So just like in scaling is your question, Alana, just in scaling to the backend is for front-end engineers. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Well, I think we went with Node.js. Well, we explored the different options of like SQL and NoSQL, and just being like more familiar as front-end students with like JSON objects. That was one of the big driving points towards going with a NoSQL database. And then just learning about the different tech stacks and knowing that like with Node, we could use Express and React and MongoDB. And then MongoDB, since that was a NoSQL database, was another like factor towards moving towards that. So some of the tools that we had to learn was kind of Node.js again. And I know that there's so much to Node, so it's kind of just picking the things that we needed and like the types of middleware that we could access with Node. So Node is really cool to see how we could use the language that we've already learned to scale our app to the back end. And yeah, I can talk more about any of those points if you want me, but those were the major tools was Express, Node.js, and then MongoDB, and like figuring out how the connection string works and how to connect, and yeah, and seeing like how the whole process worked was a really cool thing that we wanted to learn and felt like would make us better front-end engineers if we could better understand how the whole cycle works.
Thanks, great.
All right, thanks, Speckle team. On to demo number 2.
Let's do it. Escape link. Oh gosh. I'm like learning how to use a mouse, it feels like, for the first time over here. This is like if you let your toddler have access to your laptop, is how I feel. Okay.
Don't worry.
Here
We're
we
doing
go.
great.
Let me know about volume, because I'm telling you, my speakers, something's going on. So I have like no gauge. So if volume is bad, yell at me. All right, here we go. Escape link.
Welcome to Escape Link.
Hi, my name is Mike Wood, he, him pronouns, and I am here for Escape Link, and I'm going to give you a brief walkthrough of how our game plays. So Escape Link is a multiplayer virtual escape room, much like you would see in the real world, and our main goal is to allow people to play this on many different browsers, basically at the same time. So the first user clicks Start Game, and a unique URL is generated that they can then share with their friends if they choose to do so. Any connected users can then enter a nickname and chat with each other. Users play the game by trying to solve puzzles in order to escape the room. Once a user solves a puzzle on one browser or channel, all other connected channels are updated, and that puzzle is then grayed out for all connected users. Once the final puzzle is completed, all users are instantly shown the victory screen with the ability to click on the leaderboard to see where they stand with their completion time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kaina. I'm one of the backend developers on the Escape Link project, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the design decisions that we came up with for our MVP. First, we knew that we weren't going to have user accounts, and we needed a way to track people's progress, specifically for leaderboards, and to be able to join a single room so that everyone is playing together. And so for that, we created a RESTful API that starts the game and generates a random room name or group name. And we use that for the link and for the leaderboard tracking. We also needed a way for users to be able to join a single session while being on separate browsers so that they can have a combined experience. And for that, we decided to use WebSockets, which allows the front end users and the back end to communicate. We did that so that as individual users complete a given puzzle, that's communicated to the back end, that's tracked for progress, and the backend can then send a message to all the front-end users, letting that interface know that the puzzle's complete and doesn't need to be done again. That also allows the backend to know when all the puzzles are done and send a victory message out that triggers the ending screen so that people know that the escape room has been completed. When the puzzle's completed, the backend also calculates how much time it took for that room to complete the escape room, and it updates a leaderboard that holds the top 10 room names and the time that they took to complete the room. And from there, that leaderboard can be called on by another RESTful API. The front end can use that to show leaderboards either on its own separate page or at the start or end of a particular room.
My name is Danny Wilson, pronoun she, her. EscapeLink is an SOA application that uses JavaScript and React on the front end, while employing Rails and a PostgreSQL database on the back end. One of our notable achievements is the integration of WebSockets, enabling seamless chat functionality and facilitating group play across multiple browsers. This was a significant challenge for our team, especially as we aim to emulate the features from popular games such as Jackbox. Despite facing constraints in terms of skill set and time, we successfully adapted and pivoted to deliver a compelling user experience. Given more time, we'd make the app more accessible by creating a visually impaired player option. We'd also create several more playable rooms and add in a generative puzzle feature for better replayability by moving our puzzle logic to the back end.
Hi, my name is Judy Yi, pronouns she, her, and I'm part of the front-end team. In terms of the visual design, we wanted to keep accessibility in mind before we even started coding. So during the wireframing process, we made sure to use semantic HTML as a guide. And during the development process, we made sure the app's color contrast was high enough to meet WCAG's guidelines by using a color contrast analyzer and a color blindness simulator. Since we knew this would be a highly user-interactive app, we wanted to make sure any interactive features would be keyboard accessible. So we added in tab indexes and JavaScript logic to match. We also wanted to make sure low vision users are able to understand the game, so we added in screen reader only elements to hide them visually without hiding it from screen readers.
I don't hear anything at this part. Oh, it's done. Finished.
Yeah, I was like,
Great.
hard? Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
And Alana.
Yeah, I'm gonna come in on the back end again, but just would love for you all to talk a little bit more. You talked about moving the puzzle to the back end, and would just love to hear a little bit more about that piece, and what your thoughts are on how that might work.
Sure, I can cover that. The future idea of this is to have some generative puzzles so that you can play the same room slash storyline theme, but have different puzzles, so it makes it replayable. So to do that, it would be easier to have everything on the back end of the database where it stores all the narration and the puzzles and advancing the storyline and feeding that to the front end for their presentation.
Thanks.
And Justin?
I think my question might be similar related, but I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how the state is handled and how things would happen. Like if you had two instances of this running, like two dynos or two servers running, and similarly, like what would happen if that server got restarted? Did the sessions pick up where they left off? Does everyone start over again? Just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the game state for each session is stored in the database. So there's one table that stores the name of the room, how many puzzles are in it. And then there's another database table to store the group name and their progress on each one of those puzzles. So, as long as the database stays intact, dropping from the game, coming back in later, that'll all update as needed. So even if a person's computer crashes or they lose their internet connection, they can join right back in and be freshly updated as soon as they reconnect.
Yeah, and on the front end, with the WebSockets, if anyone is still connected, the channel would remain open. If all the connected users on the channel disconnect, when they go back in, it would just reconnect to the channel. So both the front end, back end could theoretically reconnect if it lost connection.
Cool, thank you.
You?
Yeah, so big props on WebSockets. That's definitely can be like pretty sticky. I did notice you had some CI/CD tooling. So I saw you were using Circle CI and GitHub Actions. Like what were you using primarily? Did you actually feel like you got continuous integration or continuous deployment? Did you have any hiccups there? What did you think it was useful for?
I guess I can chime in. Yes, we got Circle CI working front and back. We have a deployment on Vercel on the front end and Heroku on the back end. And we were able to implement both sides of that.
Did you see like a benefit to like the CI part of it, right? So the idea of like you can run checks during integration or deployment. Like how did you use those tools?
Yeah, we
we
set that up so that you know, we couldn't push it over to the production until we met all those tests. So anytime we had a PR up that someone approved or didn't approve, we would have those tests and we can look at those, see where we might have failed. Because you know, sometimes it'll work in your local environment, but it won't work on Heroku. And so you need to address those flags when those errors come up.
Oh, I just want to ask that kind of follow-up question on WebSockets, which has, WebSockets been around for, I don't know, 12 years or something like that. And at least whenever I've used it, it always feels kind of like fragile. It's like both magical and fragile at the same time. Was wondering like if someone else wanted to look into like WebSockets, I guess first, like, can you make any pitch on like what would you use WebSockets for? Like, what's the point? And if someone was going to try and implement it in their project, like what would you advise them to do?
Yeah, so I think the pitch to it, and it is definitely a learning curve if anyone's going to use it. But the pitch to it is it's like a direct connection. I think it's like a direct FTP connection to the other connected devices or users rather. So they refer to it as channels. Like, so if you're on the game link that I sent, that's one channel. And the benefit to it is like if you go on that link or you go on it later or whatever, you can chat with each other. That's like kind of how you set it up to see how it works. And the chat is instantaneous. Like there's no delay, even on like a free version of Heroku or free version of deployment. So the speed is the same whether it's on your local or deployed. It doesn't have to make multiple network calls or anything like that, like for the chat, for example. So the benefit to it is once you make the initial connection, anytime something is sent from the front end to the back end over WebSockets, it basically sends, and then the back end takes that information and rebroadcasts it out to all the connected channels immediately. So it's a very small amount of data, but that small amount of data, the front end then knows, okay, like I think if you saw in the video, the second someone finishes the whole puzzle, all connected channels immediately show like the victory screen with the time. And that happens literally instantaneously. So the benefit to that is it doesn't need to be like another network call, because what if device 2 has a slow connection and they keep playing and the game's actually over? The connection's already made. So the second the last puzzle solved, everybody gets the same victory screen. So that's really the benefit. It's kind of instantaneous transmission. You don't have to make additional network calls. It's not slow, and it's not going to cost you a lot in server space because it's just sending a very small amount of like text data back and forth.
It's Mike and Escape Link team on to demo number 3. Time to level up.
Yeah, this is like a history-making project too, because this is the first launch project that's ever participated.
What does that even
in
mean,
DemoCon.
Kayla? What is launch?
Launch is the third program. Like this is going to be like not Ruby. I don't know if there's Java. I don't even know what languages they learn over there in launch. So this is going to feel like
C#.
I know, I do know. I promise. But this is going to be like, I feel like this is a big deal. First launch project. It's going to be great. Here we go.
Oh wow, this is a lot of tasks I have to do today. How am I ever going to get all this organized and done? It's really stressing me out, putting a strain on my mental health. Let me call up my friend Rafi. Let's see if he has any suggestions.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Rafi. Do you have any suggestions for organizing all my tasks and helping with my mental health?
Yes, I found this app the other day called Level Up.
Hello everyone, my name is Eli Paris, one of the members of Level Up alongside Joe Centeno and Rafi Wick. Level Up is an ASP.NET Core web application that uniquely combines task management with gamification. Designed to elevate mental well-being and boost productivity, Level Up also goes beyond conventional task management applications by fostering a sense of community growth and accountability through our camp system. We believe that given a space to track your self-care progress, combined with a well-intentioned, like-minded community, everyone can start leveling up. Rafi, take us away.
Welcome to Level Up. When you first arrive at our website, you're going to be brought to this login page. Since we don't have an account yet, we're going to create one. Alright, we're going to create this account with the name and username of demo. And for the favorite animal, whatever you put in here is going to get passed on to OpenAI to create your profile picture. You can put anything you'd like in there, but if it's something like, for example, a human being like LeBron James, OpenAI isn't going to want to create that picture, and you're going to have to put in something different. So right now we're just going to call it a dog with a bone. When you first create your account, you're going to be brought here to the tutorial page. It's going to show you how to use our application. Right now we're just going to skip it. It's going to take you into the subscribe to tasks page, where you can select which tasks are important to you and which ones you want to work on doing every day or every week. Here you can also create a custom task, anything you'd like to do, anything you might have to do once, you can create to-do tasks, or just custom daily and weekly tasks. Thank you. Joe?
Welcome to Level Up's profile page. Here we can see our achievements, task streaks, daily affirmations, and a radar graph that changes each time we complete a weekly task. We also have a profile picture of our favorite animal that wears a different hat each time you level up. I'll quickly demonstrate that. Jump over to tasks, check a few of these tasks off, go back into our profile. Now you can see our profile picture has changed alongside our radar graph. Now I'd like to pass it back to Eli. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Lastly, I'd like to take some time to talk about our community features. We've all been there. We want to start building a new habit, but it seems too daunting to get started. That's where camps come in. Camps serve as a way for users to stay connected and build a sense of accountability with one another. I'm a rock climber, so let's look for a rock climbing camp. When you find a camp you'd like to join, you can join that camp. Each camp comes with a message board so users can stay connected with one another. So let's add a message. And that's the basics of camps. Now I'd like to pass it off to Rafi.
Thanks, Eli. We used .NET as the framework for our project. .NET was a good fit for our project because of the full-stack architecture that is built around object-oriented programming and is used by many large companies. Because of its popularity, we could rely on packages like OpenAI API having been made for us, ready to use.
Thanks, partner. What does the future of Level Up hold? One of the first things we'll want to add is more incentives around completing tasks. This would include implementing a shop system with the idea that when a user completes one of their tasks, they're rewarded with in-game currency. Users can then use that currency to buy items that can be showcased in their profile. We would also want to build out our community systems more. To do this, we will add ways to friend other users and view their profiles. Likewise, we would also want to add more features to our camp system. One way we might approach this is by creating simple camp quests or boss fights that users could contribute to by completing their tasks and earning XP and in-game currency. All of this is to say that our ultimate goal is to eventually deploy Level Up so that everyone can start leveling up.
What you see behind me is a Git visualization of the Level Up repository. I'm going to be highlighting how we geared up for future roles in software development teams. Our core strategy involved embracing Agile for daily progress and adaptability. Regular stand-up meetings kept us aligned and proactive in addressing daily challenges. Through retrospectives, we enhanced our communication, reviewing accomplishments, and strategizing on where to go next. We also fostered a collaborative work environment, staying connected via Zoom with cameras on, mirroring a physical workspace. Following GitHub best practices and evolving new technologies were crucial steps, keeping us innovative and market ready. In essence, these practices have sharpened our skills both as developers and team players, equipping us for the dynamic world of software development.
That has been our presentation. Thank you so much for watching. Eli, Rafi, and I put in so much hard work, and we're really happy to be able to share this with you. Thank you.
All right, nice work, team. I wanted to ask one upfront question. I think when you start out with the premise of a to-do list, it's like, okay, a lot of people built to-do lists. It seems like you built like feature after feature after feature after feature onto the to-do list. Can you talk just a little bit for context of folks who don't understand what your class journey, cohort journey has been like? What was the kind of time scale of this project? How long were you working on it? And obviously it was 3 of you, but like, yeah, how did you approach the work? How did you decide what to build? And then how long did you have to build it?
So I'll take this one. We had a 2-week period to plan and build this project. And it was Eli's idea originally. He pitched it to the class, and the class had the choice to choose which project they wanted to work on. And Eli, or Rafi, and I chose this project. We then spent the first few days working on the design, and then by day 3 we got into development. And these were only like 4-day weeks, and launch is the very first cohort going through this process, and we were learning and focusing on C#.NET. If any of my project mates want to jump in, feel free.
Cool, thanks, Joe. Alana.
That was cool. I don't know if Jeff, were you around when we got into like this Habitica phase, which like this kind of reminds me of, it's like gamified.
100%.
To do.
Has the team like ever seen Habitica? It used to be called Habit RPG. Yeah, we got very nerdy about this for a while.
Yeah, y'all should check it out if you haven't, because it's very similar. But
it's also an open source project you can contribute to if you want to do some open source work.
Was really cool. So like as a kind of new cohort, and you have like new things that you have to do, and everybody at Turing kind of knows Ruby and JavaScript. Like where did you all find resources besides staff members? Like how did you go about that process of finding resources for helping you through this project and journey?
Yeah, I can take this. I'll just add a few things. A lot of it's Microsoft Docs. They're really good for information. Personally, for me, I like YouTube as well. There is a wealth of information on YouTube for learning all sorts of things like this. I think we use OpenAI's API, so going through API documentation. I can't say that there was like one place that was like solid that we went to, but it was like a lot of just all around picking parts that we needed to cover. And the fun, you guys brought up Habitica, and it is funny. We came up with this idea, and then like a week into it, we were looking for apps, and like, oh wait, we found Habitica, and it was like, oh, this is exactly what we were trying to do. And it was like, oh, it was already done, but we were in that process. So, but yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in and talk about that.
Yeah, I can just add one quick thing. We did spend a pretty decent amount of time early on in the course working on learning how to learn from documentation. So we were definitely prepared to take a look at the documentation and learn what we needed to.
It seems like a very basic answer, but a lot of developers really struggle or choose not to use documentation to learn new things. So yeah, definitely emphasize that story in your job. Justin?
First off, congrats to the launch folks. It's exciting to see the first project, so well done. My question is around using Windows. And so my impression is y'all are developing on Windows machines. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that experience, any struggles you ran into. And then I know deploying might have been out of scope for this project, so this question may not be relevant, but I'm curious if you, thinking ahead, like if you were going to deploy this app, do you foresee any issues by developing on Windows? Like most of the deployment ecosystem out there is sort of Linux specific, but I'm curious if y'all have talked about that or thought about that.
Yeah, so working on Windows hasn't been too bad. We're mostly just in Visual Studio, so it's built pretty well for Windows. One of the things for deploying that we know is it costs money to make a call to the OpenAI. So in order to really bring it up to scale, we'd have to consider the economics of that and make sure that we weren't having, people make 1,000 images and all of a sudden it costs us a bunch of money. If anybody else wants to add on.
Cool. And Hugh?
So big, huge props on this app in general. I'm on the interview team and I've interviewed some people for launch, so it's like really exciting to see it come full circle from when it started. And I've had to work on like an app that had a front end inside of like a monorepo C# ASP.NET Core app. So like, can you talk about how did you bridge that gap of like kind of working in a backend framework that was going to deploy a front end app? Did you have any like sticky points where you're trying to get the HTML to work right? Or did you find like it was pretty seamless once you started to get into it?
I can jump in and start this one off. I think it was pretty seamless to get started, using Razor pages and all that to get the HTML. I think since launch is backend programmed, we don't have a whole lot of experience working with front-end frameworks. We use CSS and Bootstrap, and that was kind of about it. So I think that was like a pretty big limitation, especially because this idea revolves a lot around front end and like representing these ideas of how you're leveling up. And the radar graph was kind of like one of our big stretches to try to help represent that data. So I'd say that was like one of the challenges, was actually just coming up together and getting a solid front end interface working so that users could actually interact and like enjoy interacting with it. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in on that.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add there is that we had a lot of like conversations about stuff we'd love to do on the front end that ultimately we just couldn't get to, or it was a little bit outside of the scope since, like Eli mentioned, it was a back end focused program. But I'm really happy with how a lot of the front end turned out, because there was points where it was challenging to take a lot of the back end knowledge and try to implement front end aspects.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Level Up team. And next up, I'm getting home late tonight. Gotta find something to eat. Gonna maybe use the pantry pilot.
Here we go.
My name is Antoine Obey. Along with Georgia Fleming, Lane Bretschneider, and Will Chen, we bring you Pantry Pilot, a one-stop shop for recipes for those looking to reduce waste through ensuring the use of expiring ingredients, or a place to simply search for recipes based on your preferences and dietary restrictions.
Our website begins on our homepage here, where we've got an option to create an account or log in. I did create an account with my Gmail account, so I have the option to log in via Google OAuth. It should ask me for my for two-factor authentication here, which I'll confirm on my phone, and that will take me back to my dashboard.
Here on our dashboard, we can see an alert that we have 3 ingredients about to expire in our pantry. Clicking into our pantry, we see that we have ingredients listed in red that are near their expiration dates. We can click on a button next to that to search for recipes that are relevant to that ingredient. We're then taken to a page where we have a list of recipes, and if we click into one of those recipes, we see that we have a summary of the recipe along with ingredients and instructions on how to make it. Let's add it to our dashboard.
Additionally, you have the option to search for recipes that may not be in your pantry. Let's try chicken again, but this time with the restrictions of a ketogenic diet and a soy intolerance. that will give us new recipes that satisfy those search criteria. I also do love chicken wraps, so let's go ahead and take a look at these. Add to the dashboard, and then from the dashboard, what I can do is actually upload an image of my crafted version. So on my desktop here, I've got an image of my rendition of that recipe, where I can add it and then see it right next to the Spoonacular pulled image. Back on the show page, we also have the option to email this recipe to a friend, or in this instance, I can just send it to myself. We'll go ahead and click that, and that gives us sends the email here that shows us the recipe along with all of the ingredients and instructions on how to make it.
We used a lot of different technologies for this project, many of which were unfamiliar to us coming in. We used Ruby on Rails on both the front end and the back end for Rails' ability to deploy web applications quickly and for its friendliness with relational databases. We also used the RSpec testing framework on both ends. On the front end side, we used Bootstrap for styling so that our users didn't have to click through Craigslist pages. We built RESTful API endpoints on the back end for the front end to consume, the data for which came from a combination of a Spoonacular API for recipe data, as well as a PostgreSQL database that stored a user's favorite recipes. We also use Sidekick and Redis to allow a user to be able to send off and email their favorite recipes to their friends and family. We used Google OAuth for user authentication, and then Amazon Web Services S3 buckets for file upload and storage. We also used Heroku to deploy to production, as well as Circle CI for continuous integration and continuous deployment.
Our Miro board was our main source for group brainstorming, as well as our space for note-taking during daily stand-ups and retros. We used GitHub projects to create a more granular view of specific project tasks. We often worked in pairs with one person implementing the front end while the other would implement the back end of a specific feature. This enabled us to create a better understanding of the flow of data throughout our application. We integrated Circle CI to our general development workflow from an early stage, which brought a new set of challenges. Considerations for different environments and new dependencies like Redis for our background workers required more time spent debugging for deployments and builds. Through that experience, however, we gained confidence in our ability to maintain a live site without interrupting our users' experience.
In future iterations of this project, we look forward to adding personalized alerts and calendar notifications to ensure that you never miss an ingredient's expiration date just because you're not on the site, recipe notes to customize your recipes with personalized touches, from spice preferences to altitude adjusted cooking times, and AI-powered beverage pairing options to suggest the perfect wine, beer, or non-alcoholic drink to complement your dish.
For those of you in the audience who want to reduce your food waste at home, and those of you with dietary restrictions, we hope this application can help you explore new culinary horizons. On behalf of the Pantry Pilot team, we thank you for watching.
Thanks, Pantry Pilot. I wanted to ask real quick about the OAuth, using Google OAuth. Authentication and I guess authorization, but mostly with authentication. Sometimes we get to demo comp and people are like, oh, we want to implement authentication, but it was like, we didn't have time. And I was just curious, to me, authentication is like a need to have for most all applications. Was implementing Google OAuth in your app like a 1-2 hour kind of thing, follow the directions and it went well? Or was it like a 2-day thing, debugging and status code and figuring out what was going wrong?
Yeah, it unfortunately it was the latter. It took me quite a while. The main crux is that many of the tutorials and online resources use a monolithic structure with the users being held on, on the same side. Our users, we decided to hold on the back end to be able to associate with favorited recipes and images. And so we ended up storing them on the back end with the middleware and whatnot of Google OAuth being on the front end. It was very hard to tell how it was interacting, and so it took me a while.
But you got it. Congrats, Will. Hugh, question?
Yeah, I saw that you were using S3, like an S3 bucket. Can you say a little bit about why you were using that? And did you see any other potential AWS services you could use like in your application or maybe for like a feature enhancement?
Yeah, I
Can I
can take
just
this one. Add like an early part on my question, which is first explain to people what S3 is, like, and then answer his question.
Yeah, S3 is an Amazon Web Services service or platform to allow image upload and storage, or any kind of files. It doesn't have to be images. So we wanted to use it as kind of a stretch tech here, as well as just a way to kind of allow a little bit more of user engagement, I guess. Like, we wanted to make sure that the user was kind of at the center of all of the decisions that we were making. And so when we thought about how we wanted people to use this app, we wanted to allow it to be a little bit more social and interactive and make sure that people could kind of not just search for recipes and then leave it alone, but also be able to kind of keep coming back to the app once they've already made the recipes, and kind of have fun engaging with it from there. As far as other services from AWS that we could use, I didn't look too far into it, but the biggest ones that I've seen, I think, would be sort of replacements for hosting and deployment to production, because Heroku, while it's really valuable and kind of a one-stop shop to allow you to do everything you want, it doesn't let you scale very well. And so I think that if we wanted to scale this app up more, we'd probably redeploy using AWS or a service similar.
Also, I would like to add that one of the things I'd like to use would be Google Calendars to update the push notifications. I know it's not AWS, but it's just another OAuth thing I'd like to add.
Thanks. Justin, I'm going to ask you a question. How many AWS services are there? You know, when people say they're like learning AWS, how many independent AWS services do you think there are?
It's a good question. I mean, it changes probably weekly, if not daily. The better question is like, how many redundant services do they have? Because I think there are 4 different tools that do queues, like SNS, SQS, like they're all queue tools maintained by completely different teams, different docs. It's kind of a mess.
Yeah, the answer is like a billion. Like
Yeah,
there's so to find the link of the service, like when you actually want to find S3 on the page, you have to like find in page because there's so many services on there. So AWS, it is like it's kind of like going into Home Depot and being like, I need a tool, and they're like, we have that hundreds and thousands of them. Like, which one do you want to use? So, but nice work, kids. And AWS S3 implemented. Alana?
Yeah, I was noticing you all used, it sounded like you used Miro, and also you used GitHub projects to kind of manage some of the workflow. Did you keep kind of both up daily, or did you kind of translate everything from Miro into like the project? How did that kind of translation work, and how did you keep things up to date in both places, or did you?
Yeah, I can answer that. I would say that the Miro is treated more of sort of this ideation board and keeping sort of this like loosely structured. We'll just throw everything on here as far as ideas, as far as like light note taking. And the GitHub projects board was more of a reference during like after like we had our, let's say, our stand up, we would go and make sure that the appropriate tasks were updated with, let's say, a user story were to be updated with a feature. We would go in and update it accordingly and move those tasks along the board. And then the Miro just has such a nice like visualization capabilities that we use that for visualizing like user like data flows, which at first this was our first full scale application, so just understanding the flow of data from one place to the other required some visualization. So more of a creative tool, whereas GitHub Project was more of an organizational tool, I would say.
Awesome. Thanks, team. I think that's it for Pantry Pilot. And our 5th and final demo. Wild Scribe.
Hi, my name is Parker, and I'd like to introduce WildScribe, an app for recording various types of adventures and recreational pursuits. The app was designed with a skilled team of engineers, Jocelyn Wenzloff, Derek Chavez, and Ian Lyle, with significant contributions from Elisa Barca and Renee Pena. The idea for the app was born from a desire to document various types of interests all in one place. We've come to think of it as a bookshelf, with each journal on the shelf being home to information for a specific activity. Users can create new journals or pick an old one off the shelf and add logs. The choice to use Go and MongoDB for the back end was spurred by the want for an app that would be dynamic, scalable, and efficient. Since MongoDB doesn't require migrations, the back end is readily able to implement new activity fields. Derek and Ian will explain more about our architecture, but for now, Jocelyn will demonstrate the app and give an overview of the front end.
When a user returns to their app, they are taken to their home page, which consists of a collection of activity journals, as well as a breakdown of the amount of logs they have in each journal. A user can enter a journal and see a list of logs within that activity, as well as visually see the location for each log within that journal, and click on either the log or the marker on the map to see the associated log and location. For example, you can see that this user enjoyed a lovely bike ride off the coast of Antarctica in 1994. From here, a user can edit the information within, or even the type of log, delete a log entirely, or search for a log within the activity journal. Additionally, a user can see the statistics of their activity. By clicking the View Stats button, the user will see multiple graphs that are tracking the data a user enters, such as the date, their hydration and stress status, as well as the number of calories and hours of sleep prior to that activity. From here, a user can return to their homepage and create a new journal, enter into it, and get started with tracking their new activity. For the front-end tech stack, we originally implemented TypeScript, React, and React Router to allow us to create an intuitive user interface. After we implemented Redux to handle our global state management, we were able to expand and build on our existing app. The Redux store consists of two slices, one for user information such as the user ID and username, and another for user-associated adventures. We handle API calls using async thunks, dispatching actions to the backend, processing the data, and storing it in Redux, establishing a single source of truth for the app. Now the main app component primarily holds the routes available for the different components. When a user enters the app and they have logged in, they will be directed to the home page, which houses a collection of journals for each activity the user has logged. From there, the activity container component houses the new log component, the map component, the state page component, and the adventure card component.
I'm Derek Chavez, and I'll be speaking to the evolution of the architecture of the WildScribe project. We kicked off with a monolithic backend in Go, but as our app expanded through testing, we recognized the need for a more scalable architecture. We broke down our monolith into three distinct services: the user service, the adventure service, and the core WildScribe service. Each microservice is structured following MVC principles, ensuring a clear separation of concerns. The user service handles user management, the adventure service handles adventure data, and the WildScribe service ties it all together. To enhance deployment efficiency, we containerized each service using Docker. Now every service resides in its own container, ensuring consistency across environments and simplifying scaling. To ensure the harmony between services, we leverage gRPC, or Google Remote Procedure Calls. This communication protocol allows us to facilitate seamless interactions between our services, giving us language-agnostic framework for easier collaboration between the front end and back end.
Hi, my name is Ian Lyle, and I'll be showcasing some performance data that we use to validate the work we have done in our backend. For setup, our databases were seeded with 5,000 users and over 250,000 adventures, with them being spread in a logical fashion throughout the user base. We use Docker and Docker Compose to resource limits to control our app during testing. For testing itself, we utilize Python and the Locus library to create simulated users that can interact with our database in a logical way. As you can see from the data collected, moving from a traditional Rails PostgreSQL database to a Go MongoDB NoSQL database netted significant performance gains. But by breaking up our monolith into individual services, our app becomes more flexible and dynamic, enabling it to stay functional even when certain services, the user auth service in this case, experience heavy traffic, while also enable horizontal scaling when needed.
Throughout our time working on WildScribe, our team communicated frequently and worked cohesively. As we continue to develop the app, we'd like to implement drag and drop fields so that users can customize the fields in each journal, as well as tapping an external API to provide weather data for activities with the geolocation and timestamp. Another one of our goals is to make the app available on the App Store for a nominal fee to cover the cost of deployment, with any additional profit going to a charity that promotes environmental welfare. Thank you all so much for watching, and keep your eyes peeled for WildScribe as we head into the new year.
Thanks, WildScribe team. Ian, I want to ask, I'm going to guess this is the Ian question. With anytime you talk performance, it reminds me of the movie line where it's like, you had my curiosity and now you have my attention. Can you talk a little more about how this performance analysis actually happened? Were you like running synthetic traffic in terms of, were you like streaming requests and measuring stuff from that? Like when you're showing, apps crashed and so forth, like how did you set up kind of the harness, the environment or whatever to do the performance measurements that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so we use Docker first to like have a nice controllable baseline. You can set things like CPU usage and memory usage within Docker when you're deploying them. So we use that to like kind of have a nice baseline. And then from there, we, like you said, it's basically streaming requests. The Locust library allows you to like set up simulated users that will allow, it will send a call, like a push request. It will send a response back, and it has built-in features such as like the elapsed time since the request was sent and the response came back. That is what that's using to determine the response times and like fails and successes. You can get very granular with how you want it to interact with the data you're moving in.
Awesome. Thanks, Ian. Alana?
Yeah, I was curious, like you talked about metrics around requests and that, and curious if you all have thought about metrics in other ways, like how do I know that this app is successful? Like how might you all determine whether this app's successful?
I can take that, and Ian, Derek, Jocelyn, if y'all want to jump in, please feel free to help supplement my answer here. But I think one of the things that defined a successful app for us was one that was resilient and could stand up to a large user base and be dynamic. When designing this app, we had the understanding that with the kind of different templates we had, people could kind of input a lot of different information, hence why we used MongoDB as a very dynamic database. And so as far as testing the metrics, we really just kind of conceived of it as, how many users could actually do this going through a realistic flow. But yeah, if anyone wants to add on to that, please feel free.
All right, Justin?
I have a feeling my question is going to step on Hugh's question a little bit, but I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how you handled kind of the separation of logic with the microservices when you started to kind of break things apart. And did you ever find yourself like duplicating code or duplicating logic? Did you use separate repos, or just kind of talk about your strategies there?
Yeah, I can fill this question. We didn't have to utilize different repos. It all lived within the same repo. But the way we structured the Go application was we had different packages. So we used like the user package, adventure package, and the CRUD functionality kind of lived within those different microservices for each. They did have similar functionality if they were all following the adventure service, and the user services both did contain that CRUD functionality. But as far as like how we structured the MVC, we also had to use like the gRPC handler package to handle like requests within the like that handled the requests to the controller, and then we had a controller package as well, which just kind of orchestrated all of the business logic. I hope that answered the question. If not, please tell me, and I can maybe clarify a little bit more.
No, that's fine. I have a feeling Hugh's question might be similar, so I'm going to let him go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, you're good. I was going to ask a totally separate question now, if you want to keep expanding on that.
No, no, I think talking about the Go package is kind of what I was curious to hear about and how you handled that with the Go binaries.
Cool. Yeah. So I will, I'll ask, this is more like, I don't know, it's less a technical question and more of like a developer empathy question, which is like a big thing for me. I noticed that the property casing was like snake case in the back end, and you sent that back over that way to the front end as well. Traditionally in the front end, you're using camel case. Right. And so I think like in a project like this, like somebody had to make a concession, which is totally fine. When you have you thought about, or how could you think to like bridge that gap? So like you're conforming to standards on the back end, but also allowing the front end to conform to their own standards. Like how would you bridge that? Maybe on like a team, or not even technically.
I might start this question, and then if any of the backend guys want to jump in here. There was definitely also, excuse me, my voice is a little off. I'm recovering from COVID at the moment. Throughout this project, I think especially for the front end, the folks involved, it was kind of triage. We had a lot of folks kind of show up to help and then have things come up. And so we'd have to continuously reevaluate who was actually a part of the project to continue with it. So a lot of the features that were front end heavy, I feel like we're continuously triaging, while the back end was just coding in circles around us. So unfortunately, that did create a lot of gaps where the back end, while creating a new back end repo, they might change some of the variable names, or even the kind of data that was coming through, whether it be like an enum to a string or something like that. A lot of the times it would just be, we would be able to solve it by coming together just like through a quick little Zoom and like just share a screen and be like, okay, on the front end, this is how I'm handling the data, but I'm not getting it correctly. Like, how are you guys structuring it on your back end? Because clearly there's something disconnected here. So I think moving forward, just making sure we have a really clear understanding of the JSON contract and the exact data that's coming through. Up until now, it's just because everything has been so like rushed and triaged, there has been a couple oversights like that, but moving forward, I think we'll definitely have time to take a step back and make sure that there's more clear communication.
And I'd like to add a little bit to that, Jocelyn. Thank you. I think with the use of the MongoDB, that did allow flexibility within our like schema design to allow for different attributes to be added to these adventure logs. So just maintaining that kind of constant communication on like the JSON contract, whether or not it needs to be changed, is vital within an application like this, because there are a lot of moving parts. But hopefully, like having that database in NoSQL allows for a little bit more flexibility.
Thanks, team and judges. That's our fifth and final demo. Kayla, what are you going to do while we're judging?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up breakout rooms. I'm going to open up 6 of them. One of them says really dramatically in all caps, judges only. Don't go to that room. The other 5 rooms are totally open. You can go to any of those. They will be named based off of the groups. And really, this is like 12, 13-ish minutes you can take a palm if you want to. You can hop into these rooms and give props and shout outs to the team members that worked on those projects. You can go and play Escape Link if you want, or you can go to those rooms and ask questions if you have follow-up questions about the projects that you weren't able to ask. And so I'm going to set a timer for 12 minutes. And in 12 minutes, because the judges are going to deliberate real quick, they're going to come back and we'll announce the winner. But yeah, I'm going to open up the breakout.
Kayla, we'll deliberate for however long it takes, okay?
You're coming back at 12.
Stop the count situation. Okay,
All right.
We're going to do great.
Well, 12 is 2 minutes more than last time, which felt necessary last time. So we'll see where we're at. So it's going to be 12-ish minutes. But yeah, I'm going to open up the rooms. Feel free to hop into those rooms. Obviously, if you are one of the developers that presented today, like please go to your own room so that if people show up there to ask you questions, you're there to field those questions. And we'll see y'all back in about 12-ish minutes. All right, I'm gonna open the rooms. Go ahead and move on in.
So judges have a rubric criteria, and as we went through the demos, made some scoring. Then each independently made a ranking from 5 to 1, and then we worked to like merge those together. One of the things we want to do a little bit differently today is to have the judges speak to some of why they made their final picks for the top 2. First, like a very strong board of demos. So congrats to everybody and thanks to the teams for all the work that went into building the project, building the demos, and then coming here and, as was pointed out, maybe somewhat nervously answering live questions in front of 100 people. Hope that that's a good learning experience for you. And shout out to Kayla for organizing, keeping everything so smooth. Thank you very much. And to everybody who tolerated my background noise here in the airport. So in second place, Alana is gonna offer some commentary.
So yeah, so this project we thought had great use of Redux, TypeScript, a very appealing UI, and a nice use of caching. So our second place goes to Speckle. Awesome job, everyone.
Congrats, Speckle team. And number 1, I'm gonna hand it off to Hugh.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing here was the stretch tech on the back end and the front end side, like lots of attention to detail. So our number 1 app was WildScribe.
Congrats, WildScribe. Number 1. Again, yeah, really strong projects all around. Thanks everybody for joining and listening in today. And hope you get to pick up a little inspiration about what great projects can look like. We'll do this again in something like 9 weeks after the holidays to get the best projects from this inning. I'm Jeff. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Bye, y'all.